Hello, everybody. Welcome to the February 2021 Answer the Call to Conscious Leadership event. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate any comments or engagement that you might provide during this great event. That's what it's all about, having a conversation that elevates us all to a higher level of corporate conscious leadership. I am Karen Heller. I am the co-founder of the C3 community. C3 is our LinkedIn group, the Corporate Consciousness Co-op. It is a group for like-minded corporate leaders who aim to co-create a more conscious world together. So not just, the individuals who are making ripples, but the people who want to put the ripples together to create a wave of conscious change for the corporate landscape. And I appreciate everybody being here. I appreciate our panelists today, Carl and Dominique. Thank you. We're going to be talking about authentic leadership. I can't go on without introducing my partner in the C3 community, Lawrence Henderson, who without him, this community would not be what it was. So,
hey, you give me way too much credit, Karen.
Not at all. Not at all.
Stop it. But that's what it's all about, right? The C3 Co-op is all about co-creating spaces and us being authentic and open and humble enough to share spaces with others, because we all believe, if we really believe in growing people, we can't do it by ourselves. And so me and Karen truly share the heart of growing not only people, but ourselves, because we believe if you don't fill up your own tank, how can you help somebody else fill up theirs? And so we like to create some space for some other amazing people who are practitioners within the spaces of leadership and psychological safety. We're going to get into that today with two of these amazing panelists we have with us. And so if you will, our guest, who are you? What's your background? And then we'll get rolling into this conversation around authentic leadership. I'm going to start with D, who's on my screen up at the top with me.
Hi, Lauren. So yes, as you know, I spent 22 and a half years in the military and spent my last 3 years teaching at the Air Force Academy Prep School before I transitioned out. And in the last, my first post-transition role was more in the technical writing space, but then I was able to get into talent development, working at the U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense School in faculty and staff development for the last 3 years before my contract ended at the end of August. But that's kind of what I've been doing, really in that space, working in faculty and staff development, career development, professional development, and that's really what I love to do.
And next, we have the incomparable Carl Watkins.
You're too kind to me, Lawrence. It is a honor and a privilege to even be on this site. I just ran through some of the names on there, not just now, but before I opted to join. And there were just so many people that I want to glean from and learn from. I am an open book learner. I spent the last 24 or 5 years plus in financial. So I've been in the leadership with that. I have a mom that's a CPA, and she thought it was vital that I learn how to count and maneuver money at a young age. So she made it a game for us, and I went into that field. But I always had a passion for law. And as I tell the story, I used to go over grandma's on the weekend, and she would be watching Perry Mason. I'm from Chicago, so it was the WGN channel. And no cartoons or anything I wanted to watch on Saturday. I liked how Perry Mason had people give up the goods. And that intrigued me as a kid. So right now I'm studying law. I am looking to be a civil rights attorney, dabbling in some family law as well. I'll be entering law school in the fall. So I'm prepared for these LSATs I got to take in a couple of weeks. So it is a lot on the page for me. But I know that I have a gift to give, and God has given me that, and that's what I do. I was in the Army as well for 6 years, 19 kilo, and one tank commander. So I had to get out before they started all of that stuff over there in the Gulf. So I was a smart guy. I got out because I knew I was headed to Germany, and somehow or another, I guess it was Grandma Prayers, that my ETS got on through there, and I was able to to get out. But I love writing. I write all the time. I write articles. I'm in the midst of doing some work for LinkedIn, contributing to their newsletters and some articles and that there. But I hold a lot of hats. I'm also in ministry, preacher, so I won't keep my time long because I want to pass the plate. I don't want nobody to leave me out. But this is some of the things that I am doing. And I'm also starting a business, so I don't want to leave that out. Faith-based coaching, and that kind of speaks as its own things. I'm just coaching and mentoring a lot of youth, and a lot of those coming up there. They were not there for me entering in the field that I am and being an example to lead and to show that even though it's law, it can be fun. So that's just some of the things that I'm doing.
And when we close out, we're going to make sure we end it with a benediction. We're going to hand it back to you, Carl.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Well, let's get this teed off just with a simple question. When you hear the two words in whole or in part, authentic leadership, what comes up for you as it pertains to self and others? I'll leave. That's a toss up for anybody to go for it.
Ladies first.
All right, Dominique.
When I hear it, it's just about being real, being who you really are, being your whole self in the space, just showing your strengths, but also your weaknesses, so that others can feed off of that. And they can know that they can do the same, that they can be their whole selves, that they can admit to both their strengths and their failures and celebrate those things and just bring their entire selves to not only the workplace, but into their community and anywhere else.
Excellent. Thank you. Carl, what about you? What do you have to add or
when I think of that, and Dee, she kind of hit it on the head. And I'm a wordsmith, so the first word that I use in the essence of leadership is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will not admit that, but that is a tactic. And I wouldn't even say a tactic. It's just me actually being me and not trying to be a form of me. And a lot of people in management and leadership try to be a form of, whether it's someone that they sat under, whether it's someone that they looked for to glean from, but they were not, and they missed the part about being them in the leader. And I think that vulnerability is the power that you have. Not only that, it comes across that you're empathetic and sympathetic with those that you're leading. It also shows them that they have an ability to come to you when errors and things occur. A lot of times when we're in leadership, people are fearful of actually saying what happened because how we carry ourselves. And to myself, I'm like, duh, how can that solve the problem? I need you to be, I take leadership as the same as a parent. When your children see you vulnerable, and I don't mean the vulnerable to where there's a distrust, but a vulnerability to say that, okay, because they need to see that you go through some things and are able to overcome some things so they won't be fearful of failing themselves. And that's how I treat authentic leadership.
I like that. That because really at the essence of that is you're talking about really being a model for others. And it's about relationship, but it's modeling what right looks like. Right. And again, in a bubble, and there's an element, and it's crazy you went there, Carl. There's an element of morality and ethics and being good and being wholesome as it pertains to building relationship the right way, and not just you could do it if you don't get caught, right? Which is tend to be in environments and the way organizations have operated when they seemingly gain success. But authentic leadership makes you think about it at a higher tier. Is kind of what I picked up there.
Yeah, it gives me the thought process of how I live my life. My grandfather used to say to me, if you live your life straight, I just come from a preaching family, so a lot of that is indoctrinated in me. And I don't mean so much as the preacher on the pulpit. I just mean the way that I live my life. I live things as wholesome, and I guess that's probably why at that young age, Perry Mason was a draw to me, because I saw the authenticity of how he got people to just come up off it. And that's how I deal with people, even in leadership. I think that it's key. And of course, I've been to some areas. I did some directing with Chick-fil-A, and I put myself in those places where high morals is what wins out. So when you carry that attitude and you're like that, it's no fear from someone else to even be that. Even if I've stepped into a leadership position of someone who before me was not like me, I don't have a problem with making it like me, because I know what I'm going to bring is going to be authentic to the company, the organization, the people I lead, and the ones that's looking for me for guidance.
I'm thinking about all the different, so every time I hear the phrase keeping it real, I think of Dave Chappelle's When Keeping It Real Goes Wrong. And and I think that there is such a judgment call sometimes on exactly what being real looks like and means in the workplace, especially when you might be the leader who brings the vulnerability and authenticity, but you might be working in an environment where it's really like, don't tell other departments that we made this mistake. Like, let us cover our own butts first, so that we don't become the scapegoat for the entire organization type of thing. When you think, and then there's also another thing that I think about, and I have a tendency to do this. I think in like branches, and I throw them all out at you, but you can just jump in on whatever tends to grab you to respond to. But then I also think about, Carl, you had that strong moral foundation growing up, and not everybody does. And if we are going to get to a place in this world where consciousness is the norm, we're going to have to take people who didn't come from a strong moral foundation and are bringing all of that. I don't want to call it amoral, but they might not have the awarenesses around being moral. Like, what does that look like? They might think they might have had other examples in their life that were not really great examples, and they might not have learned that yet. They might be bringing that with them. So let's just start with when you're assessing talent, when you bring your talent to the team, you are a strong example of being moral, but what if the people that you're leading didn't have that benefit? How do you use your authentic, your authenticity and your vulnerability to reach that person and bring them over to, the more conscious moral side?
It's great that you brought that too, because we know in all actuality that does happen. I think the way that I have, and I can only speak for my way, and I'm not above any of those circumstances, situations. It's funny how you say keeping it real, because I've always thought of keeping it real has been an imperfect judgment of what people want to be. And when I say that, the term I'm looking at is like, what's keeping it real to you is not keeping it real to me. So that's an individual thing. So, and most of the time when people go to that and they fall on that, it's to bolster their argument based upon whatever's going on. So if I'm liking what you got, then you keeping it real. If I'm not liking what you got, you'll sell out. So I threw those out the window a long time in my life, and I understood that the right always wins. Now, are we going to run this race swiftly? No, it's a race run with patience. So in the essence of that, me being the leader calls for me to have the guidance. Me having the guidance calls for me to understand those that are under me, what each and every one under me needs. Now, bear in mind, I had about, at one point in time, 100 people under me. You say that's a lot of people to try to control. But what you do is you find your aces, and in finance and in restaurants, we call aces, because those are the ones that pattern you. Mm-hmm. And they're branches of you. You mentioned the branches. They're extensions of you. So you point to them and they continue to fold. So that's how you, in essence, that I have learned to deal with those that aren't like that. And there's always communication. I think we have a hard time communicating with people. This is what we see like January 6th. I hate to go political, but this is what we see like what happened on the 6th. Or if we're communicating falsehoods or things that, we believe to be. But what really is it? What is real? And I think when you're authentic, when you can see me make a mistake and I can own that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's some power in that. I don't care how you look at it, and I don't care how you bring it back to me. Because of course there's going to be judgment. Oh man, HR messed that up. Carl was the one that messed that up. You got to be the one that bring the heat. So once that fall on you a couple of times, people that's watching you a couple of times don't see you fold, don't see you change, there's the magnet. Therein lies the leadership and guidance.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, and I know D, you come as you transitioned out of the military, you were teed up in some different environments as it pertains to how you've navigated leadership and being in support of communities of people. What are some of the things that you've had to navigate as it pertains to honoring self and honoring others?
I think with honoring self and honoring others, when you look at, when you even research all the different articles on authentic leadership and really consider what that means, what always comes up is that there has to be empathy. We have to care about people. We have to care about what their journey has been and where they're coming from. And I've experienced that the same because, you know, I love talking to people about personal finances and their education journeys, and just understanding that we don't come from the same place. We haven't had the same journeys. We haven't had the same opportunities. And it's really about meeting people where they are. So if we do get into this situation where we might know what right looks like, but then we discover along the way that maybe that individual doesn't exactly know what right looks like when it comes to policies, when it comes to how we do things in the organization, I think you have to start with communicating what those organizational values are straight out. And then if something comes up, we can't slam the person, right? We have to be willing to say, okay, this is where the questioning comes in. The willingness to get to know people, the willingness to find out what the thinking was, what the thinking process, coming from that place of empathy, realizing that we haven't been perfect, that we haven't been without our own flaws, and authentic leadership is all about that, really modeling that it's okay to have made mistakes, that it's okay to have flaws, that it's okay to have failed at different points in our life. And yes, it's possible that not every situation is salvageable, right? However, we can still take care of that person all the way through the process.
Agreed. And I want to note that Chris, thanks for being here, Chris, had a great question about, yes, it's easy to be moral in a perfect world, but what about crisis mode, right? And right before we get to that, though, I feel like we're hitting upon something that's really prevalent right now, the term cancel culture. Okay. Yeah. Leadership is under more scrutiny than ever before, and it's not unjustified. But does that being able to love somebody through their mistakes, I mean, do we hold these leaders now to a higher standard because they're supposed to know better? Or are there unforgivable mistakes, you know, that really do justify us saying, like, no longer will opportunity be yours, or you've been taking too much for granted the opportunity that you've had, or you've been abusing your opportunity? I mean, at what point do we say, you've crossed the line now as a leader, and you no longer get the privilege of being a leader?
So, and I know we talked about it last week, but in the book, The Fearless Organization, we talk about the need to set the stage, invite participation, and productively respond. And one thing that Dr. Amy Edmondson talks about is that productively responding doesn't always mean that the situation is salvageable. For instance, if a leader, she brought up a specific instance where somebody went kind of on a racist rant after this invitation to participate. one of the leaders. And in that case, it wasn't salvageable.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, it just isn't going to be salvageable because then there's been a violation, a violation that is unrecoverable.
Mm-hmm.
And then that becomes kind of a lesson for everybody else. We had that a lot too, as well, at the Air Force Academy. Not every, or at the Air Force Academy Prep School rather, but not every situation is recoverable. But that doesn't mean we're throwing people out. We're still acknowledging that could have been us in other situations, depending on what the situation was. And it's really about being self-aware and continuously self-reflective on our own journeys, asking ourselves, when have I been in this kind of situation? But no, not every situation is going to be one that we can save.
I agree. I mean, great point. And Carl, what do you think about just the environment of cancel culture? Are we inhibiting authentic leadership by telling leaders that if they make too far of a mistake, they'll be, booted from leadership? How do we encourage authentic leadership, but still say, here's a line, you don't cross it? Or do we kind of when you think about it, that was a leader who verbalized the wrong thinking, right? And then broke rapport and is not going to be an effective leader anymore once that line is crossed. So you kind of have to be like, well, you're not going to be an effective leader, but do we want that to come out? Do we want to expose that? Do we want people to say, there's tons of leaders right now who have racist thoughts and backgrounds still in leadership. They're just not verbalizing it, How do we encourage authentic leadership in this culture of cancel culture, and also make sure that leaders are effective in their thinking and in their treatment of other people, even when it's not outwardly expressed?
It is hard. It is hard. I have parents and grandparents that were born and raised in the South, Mississippi, Alabama. So my roots run a little deeper on those sentiments. I've also had those kind of things happen to me in the workplace as of me being a leader and being vulnerable and being attacked for that vulnerability. What I do say, and this is also some of Christopher's question in there, there is no perfect world, but the morality of the individual can maintain its perfection. And when I say that, I mean that in what you know to be true and what you know to be real and honest, you can continue to exhibit that. Now, what we've had just say in the case of just talking about politics on the line for just a brief moment, we're talking about the leaders in the House and the senator that walked around with that. I have empathy for misunderstanding, not knowing, and ignorance to a certain extent. And I don't mean that I'm greater than or think that I'm higher than. There comes some responsibility once you are in leadership that you cannot continue to walk in the fashion of ignorance. So if you're going to lead other people, you have got to get to the education mind of the sympathy, the empathy, and understand that, yes, I do want you to be authentic, and there is power in being authentic, but also there's responsibility to those that are following behind you. We have now and this is not to Republican or Democratic, it's not based upon how you voted, but we had 150 million plus people vote. 75 plus million voted for Mr. Trump, 78 or so voted for Biden. When you look at that, a lot of people had a lot of things to say on both aisles, but who were coming to the table when these leaders and saying that, and we see a lot of the demonstrative attitudes of the things now that is going on because people don't want to get back to what they know. And when they say what I know and what you know may be different in us understanding it, but the moralness has always been the same. And it's coming across on which side of the field you want to play on. And yes, that culture can be, but it's also to display those morals. It takes you to take a stand. What do you stand for? When we look at great leaders like Martin Luther King and those that have stood on, even I don't all the time go so much as what with Malcolm X and some of the things he did, but they had principles that they thought about, that they thought were level for everybody, and they stood on those. These leaders today, when you look at them, they're this way today, that way tomorrow. How can I lead an organization, even in silence? How can I lead an organization with those thought processes? Because in the end, if it's not true, it's going to show its face. And this is what we're seeing. You can only hide a lie for so long. I don't care, what that is. But I think that the culture cancel, it is real, and people are tired of it. And I think that's where it came into, because people tired of people leading them, leading people off, like a mice leading the blind leading the blind, like my grandma said. That both of y'all gonna wind up in a ditch. Who is that helping out? If you're gonna be my leader, I can have faith and confidence in you as a leader, per capabilities, per understanding, per qualities, for all of those. But when you go on the nonsense part of that, especially with me being a soldier, how many orders did we follow that we just didn't agree with? Hurry up and wait was one of my most hateful orders in the Army. What sense did that ever make? But it is a true thing. It's a real thing. People are going to have to take a stand, and they're either going to be on the side of equality and the things moving forward. And these companies are going to pay the repercussions. It starts with that, but it's going to make a wave, and people are going to have to, they're going to have to vibe with it from that point of view.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, D. No, go ahead, D.
No, last night I was listening to, his name is Rishad Tobacco-Wala, and he's the author of Restoring the Soul of Business. I was listening to him on a podcast last night, and he was talking about what played into the development of his leadership philosophy and what he believed in. And he said that he found that working for a fantastic boss in a smelly bathroom was better than working for a terrible boss in a rose garden. He was talking about authentic leadership and how he developed his philosophy over the years. And and that's what he was talking about. He was talking about a lot of the things that we're talking about today when it comes to authentic leadership and, the need to be able to say that we're wrong and to have vulnerability. Leaders, people wanting to work for leaders who make them feel connected, who make them feel they're growing, who make them feel they're working for a purpose. But those were just some of the things he was talking about. And I really liked that quote from that podcast last night.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And I love that because I think about all the deployments that I was on where we actually had fun on movie night in a combat zone. And it was like, how can you get somebody to be okay with a sucky environment? But it goes to that same thing of it came from being and modeling authenticity. And to Christopher's point, the morality is not a perfect scenario. It's a lifestyle. It's a habit. And so to me, if morals and values are abandoned in the moment of crisis, they actually just showed you true character. And so for me, it's when you establish environments, and that's why organizational culture and capacity are such a thing for me as a leader. Like, I need to locate you. And I really believe that's what makes cancel culture so easy, particularly going to extremes in cancel culture. Because it's like, all it took was for somebody to disagree with you, for you to like really show your true colors. Like, oh man, like I know what your button is. And so what happens is people are having such visceral reactions as if somebody's coming for them. But whatever happened to us having constructive conversations where we can disagree, but still be respectful and honor the humanity of others? But that's where people, the definition of humility is what I bring to the table, particularly around authenticity. It's like, hey, I'm comfortable in my own skin and I want you to be as well. So we can actually have a dialogue that's actually meaningful and that's actually helpful. Because again, let's be clear. We live in the United States of America, where it was law to have whites only stuff. It was law that Jim Crow direct systemic things were against minorities, particularly Black people in this country. Like, that was law. That was ethical. And so when we have these conversations, let's have them in context. And to me, authentic leadership says, I'm not only going to honor myself, but I'm going to honor those that I am engaging with. And as a business practice, not as an option, not just as a t-shirt that I wear, but is this going to become a lifestyle? And I believe that's the part that's becoming hard for people, is really putting authentic leadership into practice. That's where I think the fork in the road is happening.
I think it's also important to say authentic leadership in the framework of conscious leadership, right? Because I mean, you can be authentic and not necessarily be for the highest good. And that's really the basis, the foundation of conscious leadership is leading for the highest good, which isn't always self-serving. And to Chris's point, in a crisis, in survival mode, we can justify a lot in self-preservation's name, right? And how do we as leaders not only manage ourselves in that moment to make sure that, you know, we all had to have income. We all need food. What if something comes in and threatens that? And to be mindful and self-aware. And we talk about self-awareness every single time, to know when that reaction is rising up in you, and then to be able to say in an authentic moment, like, my first instinct is to preserve myself in this role, in this job. And you can justify that. You keeping your job at any cost is better for everybody, right? Because then you can lead them through this crisis moment. Tell me about your experiences, because we've all experienced crises now through 2020, and I'm sure there have been many crises, especially with everybody's background here before 2020. But tell me about that moment for you, whether it was 2020 or another moment where you realize that there is something that's threatening your very livelihood and your very survival, and how you can lead through that moment. And thank you, Chris, again for your question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Great question from Chris. And those are real moments, and those are real things. I've had a few issues that have came up in direction of me making a choice, and I think that choice always. And I think the professor, Mr. Lawrence, hit it on the head when he said that it begins from, and Dee touched on this, because it's really everything comes down to how you was raised. Now, whether we want to admit that or not, or whether we guide ourselves by that, it all comes from the parent instructing the child the right and the wrong, right? When you go down to the simplicity of it. Now, where you go from that and what you take from that often develops with the individual. So you're looking at that and you get that moral fiber that's already enrooted. And of course, I got a brother he's the blackjack of the family, so they like to say. But we grew up in the same house. We were taught the same things. We understood what things meant. And of course, you're going to have those that go astray. I do not never give up on him. And he's always in my heart, and always I'm there for him. When you take on that kind of mentality in the workplace where things have been set to you at such levels, I think you have to do a moral fiber check within yourself. Oftentimes, my dad used to say, you pay someone, and I got a lot of these kind of stories. He said, you give somebody the job. He said, you take two black people, and I just said frankly how he said it. So you take two black people and you give them a job. He said, you tell one to work and give them that job, and you tell the other one to tell that one what to do. But you pay the one that actually works more money, and you offer the other one less money. He said, you're going to always have the one take the less money because he has the obligation and he has the authority to tell the other one what to do. And I said, well, that would make more sense, right? But he says to me, and what they're saying to me, your moral fiber is you're so concerned about telling somebody else what to do that you're not concerned about the job. So when I take jobs and when I look at things, yes, I have to feed my family, I have a mortgage, car payments, I have what everybody else has. But I have to go into a situation that I know I can be Carl. I can't go into a situation where I have to be something that Karen wants. And when I say that, I don't mean so much as what you want, but I have to make sure that the policies, the procedures, and the guidelines of that organization, of that leadership structure, and those that's going to be telling me what to do and me leading other people, somehow they get the line with how I feel. Now, I could be a unicorn in that and thinking that, there's a lot of people take jobs because they need to get paid. Mm-hmm. And I'm not oblivious to that. But I'm just saying, on the fiber of keeping it with Christ's sake, I would like to be in those positions, and I have been in those positions where falling around. If any of you guys have ever eaten at Chick-fil-A, you can just about imagine how a lunch period there is. And I've had 100 people and 100 kids screaming at me all at one time to take care of things and malfunctions. When you look at that and you say, it's a crisis, so I can just say, okay, well, get that away. Okay, well, not charge them for that. That's me taking away from that. What I can do in the essence of a business thing, say, you know what, we're going to take care of this for you, but here's a card. I want you to come back so you have an opportunity for us to take care of you better. We have to look for some other solutions in those crises than to just throw in the towel. What about with your life? When you look at it, we put so much kindness on being in these businesses and being in these companies and wanting them to provide an answer. We should come in providing an answer. We should come in providing a solution to some of the things that they're dealing with. But that's just my thoughts. You know, I think way out sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's solution focused in the middle of a crisis, and that is, I don't know if it's a standard necessarily for leadership, but it is something that you expect from a leader, that they're going to be able to be in a crisis and say, these are the solutions that we have control over. We can do this, and then taking accountability for the mistakes that happen. Dominique, what about what about? Can you tell me about that moment for you, the self-awareness in a crisis, and how you can recognize that there might be a tendency to justify something for self-preservation, or if you've recognized that in somebody else you're leading? That, I feel like that's an important thing to talk about, because I think about the volumes of leaders that could be in corporate positions right now, knowing that their company is doing something unconscious and having to, for the sake of self-preservation, justify going along with it, because that's paying their bills, it's taking care of their family. And in a crisis, I mean, I get anxiety just thinking about, what could still happen, what could have happened if like all of our infrastructure just broke down and we all had to fight to survive. We'd like to think that there'd be that moral code there. We would maintain it. We would come into it with our upbringing, with our morals. But survival mode is a very different animal.
I think survival mode is a very real thing. Mm-hmm. I would say that I've had many, many moments like that in my life where I was alternating between survival mode and fight or flight and self-protection mode, but then ultimately knowing that I still wanted to learn, that I still wanted to grow. It's not that you're not going to grow when you're in survival mode. There were times when I was in that anxious state Dr. Edmondson talks about, when you have low psychological safety and high standards and accountability, right? Mm-hmm. You're either going to be in anxiety mode. So with low psychological safety, high standards, high accountability, you have anxiety mode. With high psychological safety and high standards, high accountability, that's when you're in the learning zone. So I think it's a matter of staying very aware that when you're in that crisis mode and when you're in that self-preservation mode, giving yourself grace and giving your people grace to do what they needed to do to survive in that moment. But at the same time, if you really do want to move on and be your best self and eventually get to that place, if you're not comfortable, if you're not okay with stagnating and staying there, then it's a matter of continuously checking in with yourself. I'm here right now. I'm doing what I need to do to take care of business, to survive, to get through this period. But eventually I'm going to be there. I'm not content to stay in this place. And I'm not content for the people around me to stay in this place either. Eventually we want to get there, and always kind of staying focused on that goal of getting to that place, because you're either in the anxiety zone or the learning zone.
I love that. You're all in my box now, D. You already know you in my box, and I love what the Emily said. She's on it today because it's about community as it pertains to this leadership thing, right? If you're an island of excellence or a single point of failure, strike one, and two and three. Because if you're the only one, you're the incubator, you're the idea creator, the idea, all that other stuff. Nah, something bad's gonna happen. And I love what you said there, Dee, particularly around creating this level of awareness for yourself. And it's almost allowing others around you to have permission for us to grow together. And what it really came up for me as you were talking was the reason why you train so much before a deployment, right? And again, we had all types of field exercises before, I went to Iraq as a 24-year-old, a year out of college. And, everybody thinks combat, you come back and you dream of war and that's why you go. No, but when things happened, it was the muscle memory. We didn't throw all caution to the wind, like throw our weapons up in the air and run. Like, no, it was something that kicked in because we had the reps. And leadership and authentic leadership, if you what comes up is what you've been practicing. And so when your thought is abandon all morality or abandon good sense and all these other things, like, what have you been practicing? Right? Practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. And so it really questions, what have you been nurturing within your organization and within yourself that was even an option for you to abandon what is right? And it really speaks to something you said. Are you a whole leader or are you a hurting leader? And you're just putting on a brave face, because really that check engine light is going to reveal itself in times that you actually need to use leadership and actually be that person for the moment. And really it'll expose itself when you're not full and ready to perform.
I love what you said, Dominique, about the high accountability, high psychological safety, making all the difference in being in that learning zone as opposed to that crisis state. We've talked, psychological safety has been a topic of this group before. Accountability, I don't know if we've actually talked about accountability. I think it might have been on some surveys in the past and just wasn't chosen as a topic. But as an organization, I think that can be a very subjective thing to, a very hard thing to assess for an organization is what level of psychological safety do we have? Are our people in self-preservation mode? Or to Carl's point earlier, are there problems that we don't know about going on throughout the organization? What's going on? You need that psychological safety to make room for people to make mistakes, and so that you can nurture them through them. And you need that psychological safety to create a space where people can be authentic and bring their whole selves to work, as you were saying. I have a different kind of branch that I want to go on when it comes to authentic leadership. And it's really, do we think that that there's room in this world, in this landscape, for people to be authentic and I have to think of a way to put this. I'm gonna toss this to Lawrence because I want to think of the right way to ask this that you guys won't. I need to string some things together in my brain.
I got you. She's tapping into consciousness.
I am,
and I love it. Well, we had actually a really great question from Sarah. Yeah. Sarah, thank you for being here, and particularly around how do you combat being in positions of leadership and sacrificing family needs. And I liken this. I'll respond really quick, and I'll toss it to Dee and Carl. But leadership in and of itself, positional leadership, that's skill level 1 stuff. And you were assigned and put in a place. But the real game changer is the empowering of others to actually be what they're supposed to be and what you pay them to do. And so leadership, if you're a leader now, if it's a startup or if it's something like that, then yeah, everybody's going to be burning some candles on both ends. But it's all about managing expectation when it comes to leadership in and of itself. And Carl pointed to it earlier. are you empowering others to grow? What are you doing to put people in position to grow so you can actually know and locate people so they can be put and given more capacity and high increased levels of understanding? There's a great situational leadership model out there by Ken Blanchard that I love, finding out development levels for people that really support leaders being able to give responsibilities away. But it's not until you locate those on your team. So what are just some of your thoughts of how to combat sacrificing family for when being in a position of a people leader within organizations?
Well, I think all the articles, all the books show, and I realize it's a very cliche statement, but we have to be the change that we want to see. Leaders have to model that. It could be as simple as, hey, you may be getting this email from me and it's 10 at night. I'm not expecting you to respond. That's just when I work best. You know, I saw an example of that. I think somebody was talking about it in a podcast, in one of the podcasts I was listening to. But making that explicit. I'm not expecting you to sacrifice family right now. I'm expecting you to prioritize wellness. And oh, by the way, here are all the resources that our organization has that can prioritize wellness. We're seeing that not a lot of employees are taking advantage of these things. We'd like to promote them. Here's this wellness program. Here's these education programs. Here's this time to prioritize family. We're having this day or that day. Here's how we're prioritizing community, and here's what it looks like. What I'm seeing in a lot of documentation and a lot of what people are talking about is they're saying, oh yes, here's this, but not here's what right looks like, right? When I was a young airman, I had so many supervisors, one after the other, constantly going, you should really go to school. You have educational benefits. Not once was there ever, okay, here are the steps. Yeah. Sometimes you need, even in personal finance, right? All the bootstrapper language and all this kind of stuff. How about walking somebody through how to set up all their finances on Mint? How about walking them through setting up, walking them through their total rewards packages? I mean, even though I wasn't the leader in that area, I just happened to care about these things. And if you care about something, you're going to model it, you're going to show it, you're going to make it accessible. And if you have a skill in that area, you should be sharing that skill with others, realizing that not everybody has those same skills. So yeah, very cliche, I get it, but we have to be the change we want to see.
And I think that that model of leadership where 60 plus hours is necessary to do your job, it's been disproven. Science now stands firmly behind the self-care that everybody needs in order to function at your highest capacity. I want to go back to my thought. And it's really about that, bringing your whole self to work and psychological safety. So I've read Jim Mackey's book on conscious leadership. He was the founder of the market, the Whole Foods. And I found it interesting because he prohibits people from talking about religion and politics and anything that's divisive at work. Does that align? Does it align to say, you can be your whole self, but maybe just not here? Here you're our employee, and you represent this organization, and I get it to some level because you don't want to alienate anybody that you're serving with your own beliefs. But how does authentic leadership bring in that? We're not necessarily just going to verbal diarrhea all of our beliefs to somebody. Right? I mean, there's going to be a process by which we might find alignment or find a lack of alignment. But what does being authentic look like in a space? Do you bring your beliefs to work and create a space where people can throw them out there and discuss them and reconcile some of them? Or does it look like that's you at home? It's kind of irrelevant to who you are as a leader. That's obviously not bringing your whole self to work. I feel there's just such conflict there, I feel.
I think with bringing your self to work and me being in an environment I've been in, and I told you with Chick-fil-A, they are a model, and big kudos to Lawrence mentioning Ken Blanchard. They are required reading for anyone in leadership at Chick-fil-A. You're given those once you're given the leadership, and you're given his dictionaries, his books on all of that. I've read all of his books, and he doesn't say anything that's someone did hit it on the head. Everything in his book, if you read it, in any of his books he's written, everything is cliches. Because we lose the fact that things cliche, they got cliche because they work. Those things work. That's how they was able to hang on, stay on, and be a clique, which is part of cliches. So if we look at those things that you said a lot of things, and Sarah answered a lot of things. When you bring that to the environment, because I've been at companies. I worked for Deutsche Bank. I've worked for Lockheed Martin. I've worked for some top 100s. They've had those kind of things. No, you can't discuss politics, and some had it to the form of fashion that was not in policy, and it was not written, and there was not anywhere that you can see in the handbooks. But the demonstrative attitude of those that were in leadership let you know whether it was a look, whether it was like, whether it was a gesture, just certain things you didn't discuss. And I am in total agreement with some of the cause behind that, because it can be a tangent, because it can cause things to not get done, because it can be a distraction, because people are vehemently feeling how they are concerning their views. But I also think you cannot have that as a part of your corporation or your company or organization and ask for someone to be whole. You can't have the cake and eat it too. So if you bring in me, no, it's not a bullhorn. And I know a lot of you, I believe religiously in how I am spiritually and how I'm guided on that moral fiber. I don't come to work to preach. Now, if you, like another saying, my grandma said, you shake my apples, you're going to get the tree. You shake the tree, you're going to get the fruit. So once you bring that up, then I introduce how I feel. And that should always be an open place of communication in order for us to grow. Dee bring a lot of things, she's saying to that makes so much sense, and there's so many things that we have to get involved in. There's that guidance there, is that true leadership there, that true vulnerability. How can you say that, and how can I be that if I feel like this and you feel like that? Professor talked about it with the dialogue. How can I not have a constructive dialogue? We can't even have that anymore on jobs without someone getting the attitude, without someone just mad the rest of the day. And I'll just laugh about that. And I'm like, you're harboring and you're carrying all of those things that are really bringing you down, because it's not affecting me if you don't agree with what I agree with. I'm in my own skin. I understand that. But I do think that we should have some conversations that say, yeah, okay, this is how you feel. I respect how you feel. And let's move toward, maybe we can move toward a landing zone of where when you're there and I'm there, we do everything that needs to be done. We coincide and we coexist for this company, and we do the things of this company. And once we are apart, I still generally respect what you say. I think that we can't ask you to be whole and then have these substandards, because that's where lies being authentic comes from. Okay, you ain't really whole, because at lunchtime, you was talking to Sally about me concerning what I said. And that brings about division, but that's just my way of thinking of it. I can't be a whole person if I don't bring everything, but there are some limitations that you have to adhere to, because you want some standards to continue, you want processes to continue to flow. But don't ask me to, that's like you asking me to come to work and I leave the keys to the office. What good am I doing at work? Keys to the office is at home.
And realizing too that certain topics, right? A person's humanity is not up for debate. And that's foundational for me. A person's humanity is not politics. It's their humanity, and it's not up for debate.
Absolutely. I agree totally.
Man, if that's not a mic drop, then that's authentic leadership, folks. We should have front loaded that one, D. It's not up for debate. My humanity is not up for debate. I absolutely love that.
I'm putting that on LinkedIn. I'm writing that down, and I'm putting
No,
that.
I'm definitely not the author. I've seen it.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You are today. You are today. They're not live with us. You are.
That's what these events are all about. It doesn't matter if it's yours. It's a tenet of leadership, and I'm so glad you brought it. Thank you for bringing that, Carl. Thank for everything you brought.
Thank you guys for having me.
What another great event.
What another great one. Well, like always, folks, we say if you want to be a part of this community, make sure you join the C3 community. And I just put everyone's connections on LinkedIn in the chat. So please, please, please connect with Dee, connect with Carl, connect with me and Karen. We love to engage with others. And who knows, you may be the next panelist that we bring up. So Karen, do we got some stuff coming? You got some announcements?
Of course, there's always something happening, right? Always ways to engage. So, besides the fact that Lawrence and I have set some possibilities for 2021 for this group, including greater engagement, and a huge telesummit for 2021. I'd also like to say that if you are interested in conscious leadership training, I have three spots left for the Corporate Consciousness Ripple Blueprint, which is an 18-week conscious leadership certification program. If you think that conscious leadership is your permanent path, and it's something that you would like to spread, because that's really we'll level up your conscious leadership capabilities and show you some great protocols and proven blueprints, but also the community of leaders. As Emily was saying, leadership can be a very lonely place. Not in C3, and not in the Corporate Consciousness Ripple Blueprint. So if you are interested in that kind of training, get in touch with me. It's a very have an application, but it's also really a more organic qualification process. So get in touch with me. Follow me on LinkedIn. I look forward to co-creating with so many more C3 members in 2021. That is my word for 2021, co-creation.
Until next time, folks, be well, be safe, and wear a mask. Have a great one. No more politics. All right. See y'all later.
All right. See